this meeting to order. This is a special meeting primarily to discuss some budget items, but we also have a update on COVID-19. So with that, is anybody willing to make a motion to adopt the agenda?
I move to be adopted on the agenda.
Okay, we'll take that motion from Commissioner Simmons and seconded by Commissioner Johnson to adopt our agenda. Madam Clerk, roll call vote.
Commissioner Johnson. Aye. Commissioner Simmons. Aye. Commissioner Simmons. Aye. Aye. Commissioner Hayes Santos.
Aye.
Commissioner Ward.
I believe he's absent, Madam Clerk.
Okay, Commissioner Sacco.
Aye.
Commissioner Ariola.
I believe he's absent as well.
And Mayor Cohen.
Aye, that motion passes 5-0 with Ward and Ariola absent. All right, our first item, Madam Clerk.
Our first item is 91203 COVID-19 verbal update.
Okay, thank you. I will turn it over to the city manager.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the commission. We continue to administer the GNV Neighbors and Business Program. I told you last time, we were undersubscribed on the Neighbors program. We did have quite a few individuals outside the city limits apply. So we are still going through the applications, matching up the vendor information. We had a few vendors, handful, landlords that have opted not to participate in the program for various reasons. But that's a handful. I think it's about 8 properties at this point. With GNV Cares for Business, that too was undersubscribed in terms of participation. It looks like we will be able to provide the grants to the businesses using both the general fund and the CRA funds, and be able to look at repurposing the CDBG funds for something else in the future. Regard Feed GNV, as I mentioned last time, our last meals there will be on June 7th. Outdoor seating continues. We're down to just one small street that we've closed off, and I think we have about 8 or 9 restaurants that have chosen to use their outdoor parking lots, and so we continue to work that and continue our enforcement efforts into the business community as well. We are starting to notice an uptick on use of our fields. The police chief reported to me this morning that we've had some usage of the fields for football games, Little League football games and practices and such. So we're starting to think through that. We're working on a plan to reopen the pools in stages, starting with exercise and lap swimming, and then ultimately going to free play. But we have to build some plexiglass partitions in all to protect our workforce. So that's all in the works. We are looking at our play fields in summer camps, and hopefully I will have an answer for you by our next meeting as to what our plans are going to be for moving those forward. We are still participating with Farm Share, basically still in education mode. As I reported to you all individually, we have partnered with Grace and ended up housing 21 individuals at a hotel in the Southwest, and provided funds to Grace to do that for a month. And I think that's my update, and happy to answer any questions. Also our mobile testing vehicle is out and about, and we did 92 tests yesterday. And we are hoping to have large numbers again today.
All right, very good. Thank you, Mr. Feldman. Commissioner Johnson.
Thank you, Mayor. Quick question, City Manager. Can you tell me a little bit more about the landlords that opted out? Does that mean that the program that was initiated by the tenant, and then the landlord did not want to take the money? Can you tell me what that meant? What that means?
That's what it means.
Is that what that meant with when you said the landlords opted out? That's what it means. Okay.
Yes. So we had one landlord that would not complete the W-9, for example. Another one that did not want to take our electronic transfer. One that just did not want to participate in the program at all.
Okay. Is there any way to, because I'm assuming that these 9 people were approved for the program, and the 8 or so landlords didn't want to take part in the program. Is there any way that we can think through creatively to be able to have their rent paid?
We will work on trying to be as creative as we can. The goal is to get these neighbors the assistance and all. So, I just got this list late last night, so we're going to work through it.
Okay, I appreciate you thinking through that. To the money that was the leftover money from both the Gainesville Cares and the Gainesville businesses, neighbors and the businesses, did you say that money will just be then repurposed? And if so, then how are we going to go about making those decisions?
So I would come back to you just like I did with the initial program, and give you our recommendations for reallocating the funds and where they would go.
Okay. I personally would love to get that in a memo before a commission meeting. Do you envision it happening that way? So we have some time to think through?
Yes.
Okay, great.
Yeah,
and
I don't even know dollar amounts at this point, so.
Okay. Thanks. And 3B, now we funded people to be in the hotels for a month. Does that mean that the hope is that these people will now be prioritized for the rapid rehousing from the county, and that they should be within permanent housing within a month? Is that the goal?
So our partners at Grace will be taking the lead on the rapid rehousing, and the goal is to get them all into permanent supportive housing before the month is out. But that'll be initiated through Grace. And
okay, so it's going to be Grace's responsibility and not the county's responsibility. I just want to make clear whose responsibility it's going to be so that it happens.
Well, Grace is taking the lead because I can't speak for the county on how they're targeting or.
Okay. Thank you. I appreciate it.
And do you conclude, Commissioner? I'm assuming so. Okay, Commissioner Simmons.
Thank you, Mayor. City Manager, could you tell me when will the first checks be processed for the Gainesville neighbors portion? I've been getting a lot of phone inquiries from folks that applied.
I believe some of them are being processed today, and tomorrow we're hoping to, get those out. I see Diane is on the call now. She might be able to speak real quick to that.
Ms. Wilson, can you, did you get Ms. Simmons, Commissioner Simmons' a question there?
Yeah, absolutely. So we had our morning call with Deborah and the housing group, and they are still waiting for the applications to come in from the vendor who did the application, the online application. So I don't know if we will be able to make it by the deadline for payments tomorrow. The next check run will be next week on the Tuesday cutoff. So it would be by the end of next week that those payments would start hitting, the EFTs would start hitting. So we have not received any applications from the business side yet, but we have processed the vendor applications, which is the first step of the residential for several of those. So as soon as those move along, we'll process them as quickly as we can. But we are doing 2 payables runs a week to make sure, rather than just one, to make sure that there's more opportunity to get those payments out. We're not mailing checks unless it's absolutely necessary. So. And the payments are going directly to the landlords on the neighbor side. So just as a reminder that they won't be receiving checks as individuals.
And Diane, do you know if the full, we are giving the full $1,250? Is that correct? Everyone who's applying get the full amount?
They're eligible for the $1,250. It depends on what they're applying for upfront. So if they apply for rent and utilities and it comes up as less than $1,250, then they would get, a portion of the next month's rent as well. So yes, they are entitled to the full $1,250. Again, I haven't seen any of the applications come through yet, so I don't know what the numbers look like at this point.
Okay, thank you. And one other question, Mr. Feldman, as it relates to the Little League ball fields and the guys going on the field practicing or just exercising, I don't know what it is. I've had calls from my constituents speaking about having going on these fields with our youth and utilizing the fields. How are we approaching this? Because I know as the summertime, we're here in the summertime, schools are out, kids are out, and it's going to be very difficult to keep our youth from our open field areas and places. So is this something we need to do an education component to the folks that are coming out, or what is our approach? I've heard on several instances it's been kind of heavy-handed. So I just want us to know, I would like to know what's the approach and how we're going to proceed moving forward with the summertime coming and kids utilizing the field.
Yeah, so that's, Commissioner, that's a big question that we're trying to work through what our recommended response would be. And I'm interested, of course, on the Commission's view on that. The goal in this phase of the recovery is still social distancing. Right, and no more than groups of 10. Well, if you've got a group of 30 kids out on a field now practicing social distancing, what should our approach be? Is a big question. The governor came out and encouraged youth activities to occur. The CDC has guidelines that are out there. And it puts the city into a very difficult situation, especially since our goal is to basically go out there and say you shouldn't be here in this large of a group, but if they don't if they don't heed the education, we're certainly not going to be ticketing kids or worse for being kids and out there recreating. So we've been trying to tell them fields closed and you should go somewhere else, but I'm not sure there's a clear answer. to that.
And I agree to a certain point, because what it's starting to look like from different residents in the community, that one group of people are being treated unfairly versus another group of folks. And I know we have to educate the community on, what the rules are. And I know also what could possibly be a issue, and we really need to have a discussion on this, is if you have our children out of their board and not being able to do anything, then it's a possibility that criminal activity may start taking place. So how do we do this balance? How do we safely allow our residents to use our parks and facilities and practice social distancing without without being so heavy-handed, but also trying to protect the community as well, with also knowing that there's a possibility, because of the restrictions, that other things may take place in our communities that's not going to be so favorable. So we really do need to have a discussion about this before it gets too out of hand. And I'm willing to have that conversation with you, city manager, and also the police chief and the folks with the Parks and Rec department, how we can be equitable and have a balance and have some safe measurements in place. So I'm going to have my assistant set up a meeting with you all, and so we can actually talk about this and see what's the best way to approach it.
Yeah, no, I mean, I'm interested in everybody's input on it, because with summer here, in dealing with our youth, it's going to be a big issue, and having an understanding where the commission falls on that would be very helpful.
And I think too, just one thing I want to add, we have a great deal of parks and recreation and open spaces in District 1. So we really need to come up with some type of plan, because again, the summertime is coming and we have all these kids out of school, and I want our community to be safe and practice safe measures, but we need to come up with a plan. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Ward, and I also have somebody that I don't know who they are. It's called City Manager's Office General. So I don't know who that person is. I believe
That's Deborah.
Okay. Do you mind? There's a little. If you go over your name, you can type in. You can rename yourself. Commissioner Ward.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I apologize for being a couple minutes late. In regards to the folks that are being housed at the hotel through Grace, I had a conversation with Mr. DeCarmine from Grace about how they were pursuing getting more permanent housing, and they are actively pursuing it. They are more than willing to work through the county's process. But he told me if there's a different process and that they can if they can locate housing for folks otherwise and faster, then they will go with the faster route. So they're interested and willing to work with the county's housing process, is my understanding, but they're more interested in getting people housed quickly, so that partially so that we don't have to keep using room nights at the motel, and partially because people are just going to be safer and better off if they're in permanent housing. So they are absolutely interested in working with the county. I'm interested in talking with the county tomorrow about exactly how their process works, and the success rate at this point of that process, and what we might be able to offer in by way of experience in getting folks housed, and how they might best work with the folks at Grace who have had great success in getting folks housed. So there's that. Thank you.
Thank you. That's not actually on our agenda tomorrow. So I would encourage you to call the chair or other county commissioners to get their perspective on that, because I do think it's important, but we have a packed and pretty narrowly defined agenda tomorrow. Commissioner Sacco?
My question is for the city manager, just going back to the Gainesville Cares. I know that if you're paying directly to the landlord, the applicant won't receive payment, but they do receive some kind of in writing confirmation that they applied and they were accepted, and specifying when the landlord was paid.
I believe that is accurate.
Okay, and for those who were, those landlords who refused, does the applicant still receive some kind of documentation saying that they applied to this program and that their landlord refused to avail themselves to it?
I will have to check on that for you.
So my concern is once we're allowed to evict people again, there will be people who applied to every means possible and their landlord just refused to do it. And that shouldn't fall on the tenant. And I think it's up to us as a city to provide documentation to help out in those situations, saying you did try everything, so they have something to show the court later.
I'm told that they will receive letters.
Okay, thank you, sir.
All right, thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Hayes Santos.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. To the point about the fields and the practices, in my view, I think we need to be careful. I mean, having teams and practice, that's a lot of people, and they're all going to different homes and the spread. And I think we need to be careful about reopening. I know the governor said let kids do everything. I don't think we're at that point yet. So I want us to make sure that we don't just let massive practices and things like that go on. I think Commissioner Simmons is right. We need to make sure it's a delicate thing going out there telling kids, hey, get out of here. But there is a public safety crisis going on, and make sure that and the numbers have been going down, but we need to keep those numbers down. So thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Yeah, this is really a difficult situation, Mr. Feldman. Y'all probably either if you watched the county meeting or read the paper, you're seeing that they're extrapolating state testing, antibody testing, and showing right now that probably 5% of the population has been infected, meaning 13,000 people in Alachua County. And so I'm very concerned that these children become vectors. They go visit their elderly grandmother or whoever, and that's really vulnerable, or that relative or friend with a underlying condition. And so I think right now, I mean, I don't know that this is going to be the solution to the problem, Mr. Feldman, but I think our parks folks and whoever else you can sort of marshal to the cause, being really proactive, especially with the organized leagues. If a bunch of neighborhood kids decide to show up and have a pickup game, that's really, really difficult we're basically going to get a call from somebody saying, hey, these kids are out there and we're going to respond to it. But for the organized folks, I think we really just need to reach out and sit down with the leaders of those organizations and share with them CDC guidelines. And it seems like every organized sports sort of national association has guidelines out. And what it's going to come down to really is it's got to be groups of 10 or fewer. So if you've got a football team, you're going to have to split your children into different groups and conduct your practice. I mean, I think that's the hardest thing is a lot of folks, it's sort of a binary thing. We're either in stay at home and sort of lockdown mode, or we're back operating the way we were before this all happened. And there's an in between, and that's what I think folks are having. Some folks are having difficulty adjusting to. What does that in between look like? And so I think that's where our parks folks can really help. Some of these people that they're all volunteers. They do something else in their life, and they do this just out of love of kids, right? And so they're not expected to be experts on best health and safety practices or CDC guidelines. And so I think if we help them with that part and show like, okay, this is the way we keep our community safe, and this is the way we keep our children safe, and here's what is recommended, that we then can depend on them to implement those guidelines. And then if they don't, I think that's a good thing to ask our other mayors on Friday. How are they approaching it? We don't want people to get fined or ticketed. We don't want to be the old guy on the lawn chasing the kids away with fists shaking. But we also have a responsibility to keep them safe, because they are going to go impact so many other more vulnerable people in our community. But I think the first step is just really reaching out to the organized associations and being very clear about what the sort of best practices are according to their whether it's USTA or Pee-wee or whoever it is, what they say, and then what the CDC says. Commissioner Simmons, you're laughing at my old man reference. I know.
I was laughing at
we're the same age.
I totally agree with everything you said, Mayor. You're absolutely right. And I just wanted to say that Paul Myers with the health department, we were talking about this, and I think this is a component that we've been overlooking, is the multi-generational families. And we haven't really targeted those groups yet. And so his team is working to put some literature together with photos, and I can have, or City Manager Lee Feldman, I think Lee knows about that, and maybe Lee can get with him and share that literature with the Parks Department. So we'll have some education brochure or something with photos and grandmother and grandchild and the effects of if your child goes out into the playground and come back home, what that looks like. I think that's going to be key, and we need to start focusing on some attention on those multi-general families during this time. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you. All right, I'll just really quick, and then we'll get on to our main event today. I've been in close communication with UF, and they're very committed to working with us. They understand how heavy of a lift this is. They're, be as diplomatic as possible here. There are many decisions that are being made for the university above Dr. Fox and Charlie Lane. They're being made by the state. And so, what they're trying to do right now is get the best recommendations and information to those decision makers that are higher up. So they have good, solid information. And then, after that, they have to figure out how to do what they're even essentially told to do. So we're working on that. They had 11 working groups that have pretty much completed their work. That they'll all issue a white paper or report in their area, and they're going to share those with us, so we'll know exactly kind of what they're doing and how they're thinking about things. And then I'm going to work particularly close enough with the VP for Student Affairs and that group, because that's going to be, I think, the biggest challenge for us. How does the city, how can we be helpful in protecting community health when all of those students, staff, and professors are not on campus? And that's going to be a real challenge, and that's exactly the kind of thing that I'll be challenging the other mayors that we'll be working with to see how they're approaching that as well. And what was the other? we need to prepare ourselves for live college sports this fall. That decision hasn't been made. You know, a final decision hasn't been made, but you know, it's like the magic 8 ball. All signs point to probably going to happen. Now that doesn't mean there'll be people in the stadium. It might mean that, but it does mean that there'll probably be lots of people in Gainesville while it's happening, and it's going to just be an incredible challenge for us to, you know, ensure that people are socializing safely. So, you know, we'll find out more, I think, in the coming weeks here. But, you know, I think it's one of those things we have to start preparing, you know, for the worst case scenario, which is 100,000 people kind of out tailgating and hanging out and trying to, you know, pack bars and things like that, and how we deal with that. So that's, you know, a lot. Again, we don't know a lot, and that could change, and you know, we can't wait until the decision's made to start figuring out how we operationalize that, you know, because we obviously it can't be the same as it would any other normal football season. So that's that. Thank you, everybody on staff, for all the work that's going into this. Just incredible. You know, I know just how stressful and difficult it is. If you're like me, the psychological toll is really starting to, affect you, and that goes for everybody in our community. And so I just want to thank everybody on the front lines working for the city to try to keep it safe and do good work and make good decisions. I know we get our share of heat, but more people than I've ever seen in my 12 years of service have reached out and thanked the city, not me, but the city, for what we're doing, and they feel fortunate to live in a place that puts their health and safety first. So thank you, all 2,200 of you that are out there making that happen. All right, with that, Madam Clerk, let's move on to our first budget discussion with general government.
Okay, we have item 191200, general government budget planning meeting.
So, Mayor and Commissioners, at our last meeting on the I forget the date now, I think the 14th.
Irrelevant.
You asked us for some follow-up information. We've prepared a little package. I don't know that we need to go through slide by slide on there, but if any of the commissioners have any follow-up, staff is happy to meet with you individually or discuss today. Diane and Karen have been diligently working on this. And as we talked about, we really can't start fine-tuning budget until we start getting our numbers in. The first numbers will be in on June 1st with the property tax.
Yeah, I mean, is there any objection from the commission? I think it's a good presentation, and it definitely addresses some of the requests that have been kind of hanging out there that are apart from the sort of bigger budget discussion. And it's not particularly long. So is there any objection to doing that, going through the slides? Okay, let's do that, Mr. Feldman.
Okay, so I'm going to turn it over to Karen and Diane.
Great.
This is Karen. Can you hear me?
We can hear you loud and clear. How you doing, Ms. Fiore?
Good, thank you. I'm going to share my screen. I will, before I start, make note that we're having a storm come through where I live. So my phone will work, but I may lose the presentation. So I'll go through this as quick as possible. So the questions that Commission asked from us last week or 2 weeks ago was there a study from Ironwood? What's the history? And we provided that with, in your backup, some of the history for Ironwood. There was a request for what does a pilot program look like for curbside organics collection, reducing landlord license fees, specifically how will the landlord pass the savings on to the renter, looking at merit increases, what that looks like in our budget from 2 to 3%, Alachua County millage overall, emergency fund expenditures to date, and the RTS fee structure, specifically free for those 18 years or younger or 65 years and older, and for disabled. So Ironwood, again, in your backup, you have a memo from the department, so I'm not going to go into that, but I thought it was useful to see the revenue for Ironwood. So you, in the blue here, the bottom bar, you can see from the revenue for October through February, and you can see the increase each year over 18. So fiscal year 20, we were tracking really good. We were ahead of schedule. Our budget looked wonderful, and then COVID-19 hit. So there's a lot of talk about where's the revenue for Ironwood? Has it been increasing, decreasing? For these last 3 years, obviously this slide shows you it's been increasing. Obviously COVID-19 will have an effect on the final budget for 20, but we have 21 budgeted so far to continue the growth. It's also important to remember that Ironwood came into the general fund in fiscal year 20. It was in its separate fund prior to that. Again, you have in your memo, a memo titled Ironwood History in your backup. Curbside organics. Again, you have a memo in your backup that gives more detail. The memo is titled Organics Collection Cost Memo. But basically here, a snapshot, the operational cost would be about $1 million. $1,170,000, and that's due to additional $15 per unit per year, and the carts with yard waste you would have to add $2 a month. But the total startup and annual costs we're projecting to be about $3.3 million. The really big takeaway here is that the franchise fees would have to increase from the current 11.1%, would have to go all the way up to 25%. Again, you have in your backup the memo.
And let me just jump in as well. So this is a full-blown program. If the desire of the commission is to look at a pilot program, certainly the cost would be lower. To do a sample pilot program for a year to see how the program would work.
Okay, thank you. And Commissioner Hey Santos, I'm assuming you wanted to get in on this item.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Because I did ask for a pilot program, not the full-blown kind of thing, because it is to figure out like what the costs are and stuff like that as you learn. So I would like to get an idea of actually what a pilot program is. Because that would be significantly different, because I think any rollout in every other city across the country, there's been rollouts over years of a time until they actually go full blown for the full city. So I think it's important to actually get a pilot cost of what that would cost.
Okay, yeah, we can do that. I mean, I think that's important.
Yeah.
Really just look into other cities that have already implemented this and figure out how, like, what the scale of their pilot was, that and what they learned from that. Was it too small of a sample? Did they go too ambitious to find that sort of right sizing of a pilot to really get us the information we need? I mean, I'm
Well, this is almost a pilot. So the department, if you read your memo, it states that we would start with residential. So we would not be starting with commercial from the beginning. So perhaps that's what they were considering when we used the word pilot, but we'll reach out to the department
I mean, I wouldn't say going to 30,000 every single residential home a pilot program.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
That's
we'll go back to the solid waste.
All right.
Okay, thanks. Commissioner Simmons?
Thank you, Mayor. And along those lines, when you say residential, are we speaking only single family homes? Because I don't see multi-units or apartment complexes. So is this specifically towards single family homes and residents?
I would have to pull up the memo to read exactly what it states.
It would be, that is correct.
Just single family residential?
It would be single family home, not multifamily. Those have their own contracts with haulers. So this would just be, I believe this is just for the residential curbside of single family.
Okay, and is that what Commissioner Hayes Santos was suggesting, just single family homes?
Well, I don't think he was specific, and that's something I'd like our staff to think about. I mean, we've got other challenges with multifamily recycling anyway, and so it might be worth our while to, as we're trying to improve the use of recycling opportunities for multifamily to include food waste in that effort. But that's something I think our staff could kind of sharpen their pencil on and come back to us.
Okay, thank you, Mayor.
Yeah, thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Santos?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. It was just for the 1 to 4 non-apartment complex, one non-multifamily, because it is a very kind of different beast than going into apartment complexes and what it takes to go in there. And hopefully we can start moving forward on that subcommittee we created at some point to kind of delve deeper into the issues, because those are major issues in the apartment complexes. I guess one other thing I would like for us to look at, one of the major contributors to what you actually fill up in your trash can is compost. So there might be a reduction in the cost for individuals because they wouldn't actually need as big of a garbage can as they have now, because they'd be able to put that waste into the composting, which might reduce their garbage bill as well. So I think that's something he's looked at when looking at the pilot as well. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
All right, thank you. Ms. Fiore, please continue.
Landlord license fees. A little bit of history here. If you recall, back in 2017, the city began to pay on behalf of churches and nonprofits. So that was a reduction of about approximately $130,000 loss of revenue. During that same year, outside of our budget process, we reduced the permit fees from $204 to $147. In fiscal year 20, the permit fees increased 5%, so they're currently at $154.25. Looking back, when I started putting this slide together, I realized that the revenue for this landlord license, we've actually decreased 66% since fiscal year 15. The current ordinance does not provide for fee reduction, so we would need to amend with commission action, and fiscal year 21, I just wanted to make note that in our budget, we have $610,000 revenue budgeted.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Ferrier. There are a couple questions here. Commissioner Sacco.
This is based on the current ordinance that is for only certain neighborhoods of single family homes closer to the university, right?
No, I didn't think that was specific to the university. I thought it was, the ordinance is for all landlords.
So someone correct me if I'm wrong, but I think this is the license, the landlord fee that we were going to remove with the new rental housing ordinance overhaul. My understanding was that this licensing ordinance would no longer exist after the implementation of the new ordinance that the city attorney is working on.
So Commissioner, this slide is based upon what is in place today. And any changes that the commission makes in the future, which have a budgetary impact, we will advise you what that budgetary impact is at the time of your consideration. So this request came back. What would happen if we just lowered the existing landlord fees today to assist with the COVID-19 response? And I think the intent was that landlords would pass on the savings to their tenants. We don't really have a way of telling you whether that would happen or not. If you do this, but regardless, if this is something that the commission wanted to pursue, currently, until you have a new ordinance in place, you would have to amend the ordinance that exists today, and then we would have to, figure out some mechanism of seeing if we can get landlords to commit to passing on the savings to their tenants.
Okay, I just want to kind of state that however much you reduce it, it's going to come out to maybe like $10 a month of rent. It won't, maybe 20. It won't be a huge, I feel it would be much more work for the city attorney's office and for your office to try to follow through on if any of that savings was passed on. And that we had all previously agreed that this ordinance was not the best way to do that anyway. And that's why it was going to be removed and overhauled. But if this is math based on what we have now, I understand that. I just wanted to confirm it wasn't, it was the one we had now.
It is. I concur with your conclusion about the amount and the effect, but we were asked to provide the number.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Hayes Santos.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have two questions. The first one, the city began to pay on behalf of churches and nonprofits $130,000 of lost revenue. So we're talking about churches and nonprofits that own single family homes and then are renting them, and then they're not paying landlord license fees on those. I didn't know. I know we did it for the fire assessment fee, but I didn't think we did it for landlord license fees. If they're doing that, they're for-profit generators for both of those.
Ms. Fiore, can you answer? Yeah.
Yeah. Now that you say that, you have me questioning it. But we did start paying. I think you're right. I apologize. That's probably should not be in this slide. I'll double check that and send out an email to verify that 100%.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you for catching that.
Mr. Murray, maybe he can jump. I don't know. He might.
Yeah. Mr. Murray, you want to jump in here?
I do. What happened was this was part of our, we saw that had like a community planning grant that we did as a, so it's like a substitute for our fire assessment. And that's what that came from. Churches and nonprofit organizations. Okay. And again, apologize for not picking that up.
Okay, so it doesn't have anything to do with landlord license fee then?
Correct? It does not. It was when we had the fire assessment and we paid the fire assessment for churches and nonprofits.
Okay. Secondly, I have a question for the city attorney on the new rental housing ordinance. It's been about 10 months since the city commission gave direction to the to staff to draft that, and I guess when are we going to get that back?
Michelle, can you give us a status update on that ordinance?
Hi, this is Lisa Bennett. Ms. Shalley is not with you this afternoon. I'll have to check with her and get back with you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, if you can track that down before the end of the meeting today, that would be fantastic. Yeah, so I'm the one that brought this up. Well, actually, let me ask one question. What's the primary use? My understanding historically, this has gone to help support code enforcement operations. Is that still the case?
I believe it is a general revenue of the city, so it just goes into our general operation.
Okay. I understand if you spread it out over 12 months, it wouldn't make an impact. This is more of a right now, and so if landlords, if they didn't have to pay the fee, that's $150. If they could pass that on to their tenants, that very often can mean the difference between being able to pay rent or not. But it's a lot of lost revenue in a time where we probably need to buttress our code enforcement operations, especially as they are taking on many more responsibilities and tasks than they have historically. So anyway, this was good information. I'm willing to sort of let sleeping dogs lie and to just keep things the way they are. But if you know, I want to keep this in our hip pocket. If we do get into a sort of second surge and a second stay-at-home order, and we kind of end up in the same place, you know, this could be something that could provide temporary relief if we could get landlords to agree to pass it on and we could verify it. So anyway, I'm willing to move on. Ms. Fiore?
Merit increases. The fiscal year 21 adjusted baseline already includes 2.5% for a total of $1.7 million. To increase an additional 5.5% for non-contractual, it will be an additional $142,849. So you have to remember that the Gainesville Police Department and the Fire Department, their contract already states 2.5%. That started in fiscal year 20.
Mr. Feldman, approximately what percentage of our workforce is covered by a union contract right now?
I'd have to get back to you.
Anybody else know that on maybe Ms. Fiore or Ms. Wilson, since you've done these numbers year after year?
No, I would have to look through some documents to get that. I apologize.
Okay.
I would call Scott Hefner, so.
Okay.
Honestly.
Yeah, so maybe if someone can call Scott. My point here, it's a big number, and I made this point the last time we talked about this, that, you know, it becomes a discussion point. We went through this during the Great Recession, that to help balance the budget, we're just not going to give raises. But what we really mean by that is we're not going to give a small minority of our community builders raises, because the majority of our workforce is already locked into a negotiated contract. And so, you know, that's, you know, between.
Hold on, stay on the line.
All right. Fred, you're live there.
Just got an answer to your question.
Sure.
70% of our workforce is unionized.
70?
70 is
Okay.
unionized.
Okay. So yeah, I just I put that out there as a cautionary tale that when we talk about work equity within the organization, you know, if we decide not to give raises, that really means we're not giving raises to 30% of our workers, many of whom are on the lower end of the pay scale, some of which are on the top of the pay scale, surely. You know, but the other 70% are have already negotiated and we have ratified the contracts that guarantee them those raises. So something to keep in mind. Thank you, Ms. Fiore.
Alachua County's operating millage and MSTU. So this slide looks a little bit different than the ones that we usually provide. I think this shows a better picture. This was recommended from Lee. It still shows that Gainesville is the lowest in the county, though, is the takeaway from this slide. Any questions before I move on?
I don't see any. Please continue.
The emergency fund expenditures as of, I believe I did these on 5/18. So we've had personnel services at the time for $237,000, supplies such as masks, hand sanitizer, increased cleaning supplies, the aeroclaves, Telemedicine and teledoc services total $573,000. We've done printing and communication, such as signage at our parks, town hall meetings, for a total of $9,000. We've had some travel for about $2,000. Meals, such as Feed Gainesville, for $34,000. Professional service and contractual service, such as administering the Gainesville Cares, our interpreters, first responder quarantine rooms, for $95,000. This does not include the rooms for the Dignity Village individuals. That came after I did this PowerPoint. So there'll be an additional $30,000 under this category. Building improvements, such as the plexiglass. We have not finished this project, putting plexiglass up everywhere. As mentioned, the pools would need that, but currently we were at a little over $1,000. Aid to other organizations, such as Gainesville Cares, $830,000. So for a total of $1.7 million as of May 18th. RTS fee structure. There's a memo in your backup titled Fair Free Memo January 2020. The department had previously sent that memo to commission, so that's just a reminder. But the takeaway from that memo, 0 to 17 years of age, the ridership currently is around 346. The estimated revenue for that ridership is about $129,000. And it's projected, if we were to not charge that age group, there would probably be about a the ridership would go up to 495,000. For 65 years or older, currently the ridership's around 261,000. It's about $97,000 in revenue. And it's projected if that was made free to that age group, there would be about 374,000 ridership increase. For the disabled, currently ridership's around 57,000. And here, we actually pay MV for these trips. So there would be, we don't actually collect revenue for, we collect $3, but we don't save it. We pass it on to MV. So if the disabled, we're projecting ridership was free, there would probably be an additional 171,000 in ridership, which would equivalent to costing us about $5.6 million.
Okay, I think you have several questions, Ms. Fiore, so if you'll just pause for a moment and recognize Commissioner Johnson.
Thank you, Mayor. My question is, out of the $1.7 million in the emergency that has been used for the emergency fund, how much of it will be reimbursable by the state?
Lee, do you want to hit that? I don't have an exact number. I know, I mean, we will request reimbursement for most of it.
Most of it? Okay.
Yeah,
Mr. Feldman.
so the federal government will, for what they determine to be eligible expenses, reimburse 75%, and the state will reimburse 12.5%. So the local share to us is 12.5%. But for example, the aid to others, which represented the $830,000 that came from the general fund for the GNV Cares for Neighbors, that's not going to be reimbursable. So when we look at those reimbursable expenses, they're mostly going to be for the what they call the protective measures that we had to take. So masks, aeroclave, items like that that were expendable that we would not have anticipated. So if I had to, and maybe Karen, if you can just slide back a few slides, I would say maybe 50% of that number is what we're going to submit as eligible for reimbursement, and then hopefully we get that 87.5% reimbursed.
Okay. And I know that you don't have a crystal ball, but on average, how long does it take to get reimbursed?
Well, we're waiting for Irma reimbursement.
Yeah,
So
It'll be years.
it'll be years. So do we have any short-term, do we have a plan for how we're going to replenish this emergency fund, especially considering that, hurricane season is approaching?
So there's a distinction between cash flow and fund accounting. So, we have different sources of revenue to, keep our cash flow going. So it's not as though we're ever going to be in a situation where we can't make payroll or pay our bills on that. But the plan is to, again, keep our reserves higher than what they are. As we pointed out during the presentation, we're closing our September 30th reserves at 15% on there, which is still higher than the 10% goal current policy, but not at the 16.7% that I would like to see it at on there. So we will have reserves. That's what they're there for that rainy day, literally in a hurricane on there. So the goal is to replenish our reserves when we get reimbursed and to not dip below our current levels any more than we have to.
Okay, maybe someone can educate me about this then. I thought that the emergency fund was for use with, instances like, the pandemic and hurricanes and et cetera, et cetera. Am I wrong about that?
That's what the emergency fund is for, and that's what we used it for.
Okay. So it's something that I'm just bringing to our attention. I understand that we are in a global pandemic, certainly, and that these funds had to be used, but considering that, hurricane season is approaching, it's something that I personally have, I'll just say that my eye on with this. I'd like for there to be a plan at least over the next 5 years, maybe even shorter, about how to replenish the fund, especially since it's going to take years to get reimbursed from the state and federal government. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. And I've actually had that conversation with the city manager and staff, and my takeaway from that is that there is a plan, and it's not a 5-year plan. It's a pretty much within the next year, within this budget year or 2 years. So I think we're on a path to do that, because I asked some very similar questions.
Okay.
Commissioner Ward.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have some questions about the fee structure slide, the RTS fee structure. My understanding is that the cost for this, rather than being outlay, is lost revenue. Is that accurate?
So I would tell you that there's lost revenue, but also there may be increased operating expenses based upon higher ridership numbers. And we've not calculated the additional increase in operating costs at this point.
All right. So what we see as a cost of $230,000 is what those riders are currently paying. Is that accurate?
It's my understanding.
Okay. Where did we? I see notes that ridership can increase 300%. First of all, where did we get that? Second, it doesn't. That's not the number that I get when I do the math on at least the first 2 categories.
That was based on the disabled category.
Okay. So I would like to treat that separately, because that's an issue of us paying MB transport, correct?
Correct.
Okay. So I'm willing to have a conversation about removing fees for our disabled riders, but primarily I would like to have this year a discussion about removing fees for children and youth and teens and for our seniors, where we talk about more like 40-50% potential increases in ridership, which I would see as a win, by the way. I mean, having more people able to use the system is a good thing, generally speaking. I will have more questions and comments about this at a later meeting, but I did want to point out that those are revenue. It's revenue not coming in. It's not a new cost, unless we can attach fees to adding new routes or something like that. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Hayes Santos.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm also interested in this, but I do believe that the city of Gainesville just can't take the brunt of the costs. We do run routes that go out into the unincorporated areas, and I don't believe that city residents should be paying for people using our tax dollars to pay for people who are living in the unincorporated area. I do believe there's still a chance for the Children's Trust, having them pay for it. I think our application was not very good. I think that's why we didn't get the money. That's my understanding of talking to people who were on the Children's Trust, was our application was subpar at best. So I think when that comes back around, we should reapply for that. For over 65, I do believe that the Board of County Commissioners should help pay for this. It can't just fall on our side, and maybe we should send a letter to the county commission, letting them know that we're thinking about this and this is on the radar, just so it's on their radar for their budget negotiations and gets ahead of things instead of being late. I also don't know if the 50-50 is the right one. It could be us, we pay 90%, they pay 10%. I don't know what it is, but I think we need to also move away from the 50-50 always being the default. But I think we probably should, if it's something we want to move forward on, I think we should ask the county to be a funding partner in this as well. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, thank you. And I know that at least Commissioner Hutchinson has very openly advocated for fair, free service. And so I think there is a good point of entry over there for the county to have that discussion. And I can bring that up with him as well. I'm happy to do that when I talk to him next. Commissioner Simmons?
Thank you, Mayor. I have to agree with Commissioner Hayes Santos and Commissioner Ward. I would like for us to take out the disabled, treat that separately from the other two age groups. And also with the 65 plus years and older, maybe we can also have this discussion with elder care in addition to the county. But I certainly agree with both the commissioners. I think this is something we need to move forward in some type of capacity. And Mayor, if you could send a letter, I think that'd be great. If we could send that and maybe consider adding elder care to that conversation as well. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner. Mr. Hoffman?
Thank you. Just a couple of quick notes to kind of add to the conversation since it's come up a few times. So outside of the, only about 6% of our routes lay outside of the county. They do cover that. I think there's a bigger conversation to be had about, the responsibility of transit and gas tax and whatnot. So that's something to keep in mind. It's actually a very relatively small portion that goes into the unincorporated areas. The other issue is that most of these, for the disabled ones, the reason why you see that very large amount is in part because there's such a large federal contribution to these trips. So it's a $33 trip that the resident currently pays the $3 copay for, and that just gets passed along. So that's why it jumps. That's why you see such a large number there associated with it. As to ridership increase, obviously it's a great thing if we've got more folks riding the bus. So we also don't see that as a bad issue, and it's not a revenue loss issue. It's only noted because it could in some cases trigger either a greater frequency on a particular route, some additional cost if it got to a point where it triggered the need for it. Also, elder care is a county program, so if we were going to have them participate, that might be a good way to get the county more involved. And then per the comment regarding the Children's Trust, the indication we got even before we submitted any application was this was not something they were interested in. So although we're always appreciative of any constructive feedback of our grant applications, we were given kind of a dour outlook before we gave them anything. So we're happy to try again. We're always looking for funding sources. Jesus and Melissa and the team out there are masters of finding grants. And thankfully, they did receive a significant amount of federal CARES money. We like anything that will increase ridership. There might be some EO and some type of studies that may have to be done for the youth and for seniors, but there is precedent for this in many other places, so we don't anticipate any significant issues with it beyond that revenue loss you see in the screen for those two categories.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Hoffman. I want to move forward with the youth and senior portion of this. That's not a giant revenue hit, and again, I kind of brought this up last time, but as there is more and more strain on our neighbors because of COVID-19, they're going to depend more and more on those sort of frontline, outward-facing city services like RTS, and so this, I think really is one of the ways we can help a large number of people, sort of expanding what we already do and what we do well. MV, disability transport is a much different challenge because that's door-to-door service. It's sort of appointment on demand service. And, I think we really need to study closely whether we can do that as effectively, both in terms of quality of service and for the cost of delivering the service compared to MV. I mean, that ultimately is what we need to know to make that decision, because it really would mean adding a complete new component to what RTS does. And that's a conversation. And again, if we're going to do it, that is a countywide. I mean, you all see the MV stuff come through MTPO. That's going to be a discussion we most appropriately should have there, and include the county in that, because I mean, if we decide to stick with MV for people in the unincorporated area, but RTS provides that service here, I don't know. I mean, there's a lot of open questions right there that I'm not willing to get into this budget year. But the other two I am very interested in. Commissioner Jesus Santos, and then I'll get to you, Mr. Manager.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I do think we should send a letter, both the County Commission and the Children's Trust, just so it's on their radar. I know the county loves to want to be official and everything like that. So I would move that we authorize the mayor to send a letter to the County Commission, and we're interested for funding partners for the 0-17 and 65 plus years for free ridership. And then we also send a letter to the Children's Trust Board and their executive director, wanting to work together on doing fare free for under 17.
Okay, I can't see most of you, so if somebody's willing to second that, can you unmute yourself, say it, and identify who you are for the clerk?
Ward, second.
Okay, thank you. Oh, these meetings are a blast. Okay, we'll wait to take public comment on that and until we clear the questions here. But Mr. Feldman?
I just wanted to point out that your general fund does still subsidize RTS. So any effects in revenues or expenditures at this point will be a general fund issue as well.
Understood. Thank you for reminding us of that. Commissioner Simmons?
Thank you, Mayor. Were we going to entertain the elder care conversation?
We can copy them on that letter. I have no problem with that, if that's okay with Commissioner Hayes Santos and Commissioner Ward. I will. I don't want to poison the well here, commissioners. Mr. Clarizio is a very prudent steward of his limited budget, and I think he'll be very receptive and polite, and I think extol the virtues of the population he serves, being able to ride for free. But I have a feeling he's going to tell us he doesn't have enough money in his budget for the services he already provides. But what may be interesting, we've been donating to the ride share program, the sort of Uber, Lyft, and we could look at how we, what the trade-off is between, the value and how many people we're serving through that versus how we could, maybe serve more people. But we'd have to get into, are those one-for-one trips, or are the ride share dollars helping people that otherwise wouldn't be able to access regular transit or RTS service? And I have a feeling that probably that is the case, but we would need to do a little more digging on that. To answer your question, Commissioner Simmons, yeah, we can send that to Elder Care as well. Commissioner Santos?
Yeah, just to amend the motion to send a letter to Elder Care. I apologize, Commissioner Simmons.
Sure thing.
Thank you.
Okay, Ms. Fury, you have up here our next steps, so we can all see that as we work through, getting to a final adopted budget. So next we'll be setting the tentative fire assessment. Mr. Schooler, do we have any members of our public that wish to speak to this issue?
Yes, sir. We have Mr. Nathan Scobb standing by. You can go ahead.
Yes, good afternoon, Mayor, City Commissioners, Nathan Scott. So I want to speak on several aspects of this agenda item, including the motion. First, the fire assessment fee and the millage rate slide the millage rate slide is patently misleading, because the other municipalities do not have a separate fire assessment fee. So for full transparency and full disclosure, I think the city should show what the millage rate would be, including the fire assessment fee, and then we might have a different story, as Gainesville would not be the lowest in Alachua County. So the story you're telling is skewed by the data, which is particularly misleading on this issue, and I think the commission should acknowledge that, because again, other municipalities don't have a separate fire assessment fee, and that's why their millage rate is higher. So you guys can't claim credit for pulling a fast one. Secondly, the organics memo. If I read this correctly, this is $3.2 million annually of additional budgetary obligations that's not currently funded, that you want to fund, but you already have a budget crisis. So I have to question, in times of your need to be fiscally responsible, whether this is appropriate at this time, or whether it should be postponed. Secondly, with respect to raises, again, I fully support our collective bargaining units in the city. I think it's a tragedy that not only we had to pay the FOP legal fees, but the city's legal fees, because the city chose to fight the FOP instead of doing the right thing and giving them a fair contract. That cost us, arguably over $100,000 plus. That's wasted taxpayer money that could be reallocated to better resources. But for raises generally, most people I know that live in the real world, not the world of the Gainesville City Commission, are taking 20 to 40% pay cuts, particularly higher percentages at executive management level. The city's not imposed that on any of its charter officers as a cost-saving measure. People, even low-level people, 20% cut, 401k being suspended through the remainder of the year. but the city is just full speed ahead. And I know, you know, city workers want to protect their pay, but again, you guys have not shown any fiscal restraint or any fiscal responsibility. And we are in the midst of a crisis, a pandemic, and the numbers aren't looking any better in terms of your budgetary obligations. So finally, with respect to cost sharing, you guys are quick to ask the county to share costs on Grace Marketplace, housing the homeless in hotels when we already pay to have them at the Grace Marketplace. But it's interesting that you at the last meeting had a motion where you're allowing city employees to work with pay for the supervisors' elections, and volunteers typically get paid. Are you looking to the supervisor elections to reimburse the city for these volunteers? Because otherwise, you're doing her job for her. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Larry, do we have anybody else on the line?
No, sir, we don't.
Okay, very good. Just to correct a couple things, nobody on the commission suggested we spend $3.2 million on an organics program. In fact, we, I think, all agreed that we wanted to see a much smaller pilot to do that, and that is not something that the commission has suggested we would move forward with. And what was the other point I wanted to make sure we? Oh, the county also has a fire assessment, so we could include that in a sort of total allocation, but we would also need to add the county fire assessment that goes to all of the cities that the county fire department serves, and get charged that assessment as well. So it would really be a wash. Okay, thank you everybody for the discussion. I will get that letter sent over to the county as soon as we can. And Madam Clerk, let's move on to our next item. Oh, I'm sorry, we need to vote. What week of quarantine are we in? Madam Clerk, can you please move to a roll call vote?
Absolutely. Commissioner Sacco? Commissioner Ward?
Aye.
Commissioner Ariola?
That was now.
Commissioner Ariola?
Can you not hear me? Hello?
We can hear you. I can hear you, David.
Okay. I said no.
I don't know if Ms. Gainey can.
Ms. Gainey?
I believe she's having internet trouble, but I have your note.
Okay, thank you, Marie, for stepping in there.
Okay, so we've had Sacco, Ariel, I apologize if I've missed anyone. Johnson?
Aye.
Simmons?
Aye.
Ward?
Aye.
I believe Hayes Santos voted aye.
I haven't voted yet, but aye.
Hayes Santos?
Aye.
Sacco?
Aye.
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 Sorry, everybody. Mayor Poe?
Aye, that motion passes 6-1 with Ariola in dissent. Thank you everybody from staff for coming back to us with that information. And Madam Clerk, let's move on to our last item.
The last item is item 200000, GRU fiscal year 2021 budget discussion.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Bolarski, I will do the old hand it off to you so you can hand it off to somebody else.
Yep. Thank you very much, Mayor. After multiple time set for the budget, sorry it's been this late before we could get, it's all together. It is what it is, right? So with that, I'll turn over the budget to Claudia Rasnick and Mark Benton.
Thank you, Ms. Rasnick. Mr. Benton, welcome. Mayor Pro Tem, you have the virtual gavel for just a minute or two here.
So good afternoon. I believe that the fuels presentation was going to go before this one. So I'm going to defer to the clerk for just a second for the panelists.
Are we able to pull up that presentation for the public to see?
The clerk needs to release the panelist. We can go ahead and do ours. It's Patrice.
They should all be in the meeting. You just might not be seeing their video.
Got it. Oh, there she is. Thank you. So we're waiting on Patrice. There are two presentations for you. One will be the fuels presentation, which you've seen in the past. And the second one will be from the Budget, Finance, and Accounting Department to cover some major topics.
Very well. Thank you for joining us. Please proceed with the fuels presentation.
Okay, give me a second and I will share that screen.
Yeah, Patrice, I've got it as well, if you need me to.
Okay, so go ahead, Eric, since you're starting first.
Walters, thank you.
Thank you. Can everyone see that?
Sure, please proceed.
Absolutely. Mayor Pro Tem, Commissioners, my name is Eric Walters, Administrative and Fuels Operations Director for Energy Supply, GRU. Myself and Patrice Caffley, who will be the fuels manager you heard from briefly there, will be going through the fuels baseline budget and overview. So I'll be going through the first part, talking about generation model and the economic dispatch process. And Patrice will be taking over on the fuels budget methodology and the overview. So the idea here is to kind of show you the major drivers behind the fuels budget. How the sausage is made, so to speak. You have the components of the model, the budget itself. You also have any of the forecasting tools that we use during this process. So we've gone through this, I think, over the past few years, and I believe we do have one commissioner this time, so this will be fresh for them. But to understand the final numbers that you'll be seeing on the last slide, you're going to have to understand what goes into the process and understand economic dispatch ahead of that. So I'm going to jump in and I'll try and be brief as we go through this. But it starts with the concept of economic dispatch, and that's the operation of a generation facility to produce energy at the lowest cost, to reliably serve customers, and also recognizing the operational limits that may exist, either transmission, generation, or any regulatory requirements that go along with that. It really all starts with a load. So when we talk about electric load in the city of Gainesville, it follows a lot of seasonality. It follows a lot of time of day. And so what you see before you is really kind of a summation of the different load shapes that we see throughout the day and throughout the year. So let's go through them briefly to help better understand what we're looking at here. If you look at the winter day first, that's the yellow line that you see. A typical winter day, it's kind of an oxymoron in Gainesville. But if you have a fairly cold night overnight and it warms up throughout the day, you'll see this curve typically. When people start to get up in the morning and it's cold, they turn on their heat, they turn on lights, they get up, get ready for work to go. So you see a bump in the morning hours. And then as folks go off to work, go off to school, etc., that load declines. And then you see a second bump in the evening, where folks get off work, come back home, start cooking dinner, watching their favorite TV shows, so forth. If you look at the next one, a spring day, it's fairly flat. We get pretty good mild winter, mild springs here, whenever they do last, and however long they last. Highs in the 70s, lows in the 50s. And you'll see this slow curve here, this red line. You see a low in the morning, it'll slowly go in the morning and throughout the day increase load. And then you'll see a little bump in the evening again, people getting off work, cooking dinner, starting their hobbies, whatever they do in the evening. This summer day, if you look at this green line, is very sinusoidal. Ed loves that word, but it looks like a wave in the ocean. You see a dip and then you see an increase throughout the day. As the heat comes in, as the sun comes up, as that humidity starts to grip us along with the daylight, you'll see AC load, you'll see all kinds of loads start to pile on themselves. And it's really a steady ramp from the morning until the evening. And that typical bump that we talked about before is all encompassed in this. You see people come home, they start their dinner, they start their hobbies. And then once the sun begins to go down, and people start to wind down, you see that load go down in the evening, and then it starts all over again. And last, a fall day, very flat. You'll see a bump in the morning, fairly flat throughout the day, and then again a bump as folks start to get home and so forth. The biggest thing to notice here is the range in the days. So in the load for those typical days. So in the summer, you'll see a low of about 200 megawatts, and that'll go all the way up to 450 megawatts. So it's about a 200, 250 megawatt swing in a single day. If you look at, say, a spring day in the red, you see the low is somewhere at 130 megawatts, and it goes up to 230, 240 megawatts. So you see a 100 megawatt spread during that typical spring day. So those days tend to vary a lot as across the seasons, but our generation has to be able to economically and reliably serve power every hour of every day, no matter what that curve looks like. And so this will really get into how we do that, how we make those decisions, and ultimately how we go through the mechanics of making the budget as a result.
Thank you, Mr. Walters. And I'm just going to interject here that in the utility generation business, we've been talking about flattening the curve long before it was fashionable. Right. I mean, because the more we can flatten that curve, the better it is for economic distribution. Economic generation and sort of deploying our assets economically, doing long-term planning, everything else. And, just for a couple of the, well, maybe just Ms. Sacco or maybe a couple of the other commissioners as well. For several years now, we've been talking about moving towards demand pricing and basically once we can get to smart meters and that sort of thing. And the more we can encourage people to use more power at these troughs and less power at the peaks. And the more we flatten that curve out, the sort of better it is for all of our customers, and the better it is for the utility. So it's sort of an aspirational thing that we're working towards, but what Eric's going to be sharing with us today is sort of where we are now. So it's sort of I don't know. Mr. Bolersky, I like to just go and re-stick that pin on the board every time we have an opportunity to, because I know it is something that will be good for everybody that GRU serves once we can get there. All right, Mr. Walters.
I would agree, Mayor. I mean, I think Eric is definitely anti-sinusoidal. I can't even say it, Eric. See, that spot. You're definitely against the curve. I'll leave it at that. Bye.
Mayor, Commissioner, Ed, you're exactly right, and I think you hit the nail on the head, Mr. Mayor. That if we can do more to flatten this curve and plan more of our load versus the generation, we can have some positive impacts on the economics. So
yeah, right on. Thank you, Mr. Walters. Please continue.
Absolutely. Let's talk about a few key terms as we go forward here. So a couple of terms is, the first term is a unit commitment, and it's really the schedule of the most effective generation to meet the load forecast. And so that's really what units are we going to use in a typical day to meet whatever load we forecasted for that day. Average net operating heat rate, or AN-hour, as I'll call it, is really the common measure of the efficiency of the generating unit. How efficient is it? Is it a Prius or is it a Mack truck going down the road? What do you see? And that number helps us to choose which vehicle or which generation unit to use. Incremental heat rate is the change in fuel or heat input for 1 unit change in output. So what does that mean really? What is the next cheapest megawatt? That incremental heat rate will give you that answer. If I have to increase my generation by 5 megawatts, I'm going to use my incremental heat rate to tell me what's the most cost-effective way to do that. And then startup and shutdown cost. Obviously, operating generation, bringing them online, taking them offline, it all has a cost. It all has a fuel cost. It all has a long-term life cycle maintenance cost, and any other items that go into that variable cost. So those are also accounted for when we go through this exercise. We'll point those out. So let's start with the modeling process. It starts with the load for that defined period, and all those load shapes by hour are kind of put into that analysis. You can study different load periods so anywhere from hours up to years on end, and we do all of them over the course of our daily business. You select the available generating units for the study period, and that's defined by outage dates and each availability for that unit as well. You recognize each generation unit's operating limits. So if I can only run it, it's only certified to go up to 100 megawatts, I can't get 150 megawatts out of that generation unit. So I've got to make a plan that stays within my operating limits for each unit. Ramp breaks, maximum and minimum generation levels, so forth. Also, what is the cost of generation? The heat rate, as we talked about in the previous slide, falls into that. The variable operating costs, both fuel and non-fuel. Any variable cost of environmental compliance, so any air quality control equipment, emissions control, reagents that are used, all of those are counted in the variable cost as well as the startup cost. So this is the point where I like to point out that note at the bottom, that fixed costs, any fixed O&M, debt service, et cetera, are never used or included in your economic dispatch. Those are considered, for a lack of a better term, to be sunk cost. And so those are not considered. It's just the variable costs that go into the economic dispatch consideration. So to better point that out, I like to use an example of traveling or taking a road trip with our family. I want to take my family on a road trip from Gainesville to the Grand Canyon. I want to rent an RV, or we'll load up in the SUV or whatever it is. But what cost do I consider to make that trip and know how much it's going to cost me in the end? So the first thing I'm going to account for is obviously fuel cost. Okay. What's the efficiency of the vehicle that I'm using? Do I get 15 miles per gallon or do I get 25 miles per gallon? That makes a difference in how much fuel I'm going to use over that time period. What are my maintenance costs? Do I need an oil change, or will I need an oil change in the middle of this trip? I've got to factor that in. Do I need a new set of tires, or do I need to rotate the tires that I have? What maintenance do I need to account for as a result of me taking this trip? Also lodging. I want to sleep somewhere other than in a car, right? So what cost do I need for a hotel? How do I account for those? How many nights am I staying? And how much per night? And also food. I've got to eat. So if we're taking a 2-week trip, that adds up. My kids eat a lot, I'm finding out as they grow older. So I've got to account more and more for that in my budget. But if I'm going to take that trip, that's a cost that I have to incur and make sure I capture when I'm deciding how much is this trip going to cost me. Some things that I don't consider in that fixed cost are my car note. If I owe a loan or a payment on the loan, am I going to consider that in my cost? Probably not, because I'm going to make that payment no matter what. Whether I drive to the Grand Canyon or I don't, I'm going to make that payment anyway. So that's typically not considered in that cost that I would consider for the trip. Also a mortgage. You know, I wish we would get a break by not living in my house for 3 weeks. You know, that would be great. I would have to pay 3 weeks of mortgage, but it doesn't work that way. That's a cost I would incur anyway. So when you look at economic dispatch, it's really the same idea. Costs that you would pay anyway, whether you run the unit or not, are typically not included. but those variable costs, the costs incurred specifically for running that generation unit, is what's included in economic dispatch. So looking at the modeling process, we start off with the load forecast and the curves that we have. But we also look at the N hour, that's the heat rate, and we create a unit commitment from that. Well, some of the things that we consider: what generation units have the megawatt range to meet the hour of the modeling period, right? We have a huge difference, whether it's spring, we have a 100 megawatt swing, or if it's summer, we have a 250 megawatt swing. I've got to account for that in the generation that I put online. What are the ramp rates and response times? How fast can those generators respond? Do I need them right now, or can I wait a few hours to get them online and meet that load? So those are all considerations that go into this modeling process. And then once the units are online, again, my incremental heat rate tells me where I should load those units in the most economical way. If you look at an incremental heat cost decision, I've got to look at really what it costs me to make the next cheapest megawatt, right? So for example, if I have 3 units online and the next megawatt costs me the following: for the combined cycle, it's $14.80 a megawatt hour. For Deerhaven 2, it's $23.70 a megawatt hour. And for DHR, it's $19.25 a megawatt hour. These are all completely made up numbers, by the way. So just put out there, for example. If I have to get the next most economical megawatt, which unit do I go to? This isn't a trick question, but hopefully everyone said CC1. And assuming you did, you would be correct. And so when I have those units online, that's how I would dispatch it. I would load up CC1 to its maximum availability, because those are the cheapest megawatts, right? If I still need more megawatts, I would then start loading up DHR, because it's the next most economical unit. And I would load that up until I hit my peak. And then when my load starts to fall off, I would go in the complete opposite direction. I would decrease the load on the most expensive unit. And then once I reach the bottom of that one, I would then decrease the load on the next most expensive unit, and so forth. And so that's how we kind of build on and use that incremental heat rate to help us keep down our cost, but also be able to serve load in a reliable way. So what crunches these numbers? There's a lot of data that goes into it. And there's no way that we sit back with a piece of paper and try to figure this out for every hour of the day. Our load changes across the electric system in Gainesville very quickly. We actually reassess the load every 2 to 4 seconds. And so I don't have someone with a pen and a pad recalculating these numbers every 2 to 4 seconds. So when I do modeling, I don't have the capacity to do that manual either. So what we use is a program called GenTrader. It's an energy model, and it determines the most economical scenario. We use it for unit commitment in the short term, as well as long-term planning. So anything from the next 7 to 10 days, the next 2 hours, all the way out to the next 20 years, we use GenTrader for that. It's what's called a deterministic model. So in other words, it gives you one answer, and that one answer is the most economical answer, okay? It does not take into account any reliability concerns. It does not take into account any real-time transmission constraints, any hurricanes that may come through. It doesn't account for that in any long-term planning. It just says, assuming everything goes as planned, here is the most economical answer for you. Now, we've got to use some of our experience and also our expertise to go back and say, well, I see the most economic answer, but how do I account for the reliability in that? That's done more on the human side, but the numbers, the economics come out of GenTrader. And so what goes into these numbers? And I'm going to go through these quickly. I'm not going to read all of them. But some of the things that we've talked about, starting at the top left, is heat rate curves. What are the what's the most efficient unit to use in those time periods? What's the dispatch limit? O&M costs, startup profiles, ramp rates, so forth, scheduled outages. The next big thing is the fuel data. When you look at a variable cost for a megawatt, somewhere between 75 and 85% of that is actually going to be your fuel cost. Okay, so fuel data is important. Fuel forecast for each of the commodities we may use is important to be used as an input into GenTrader. We use any power purchase agreements that we have. Okay, so G2, Solar Fit, any market opportunities that we have or have made or go into GenTrader as an input. Our load data, anything that we have for native load, we are the wholesaler for the city of Alachua. We provide all of their electric generation needs. All of that goes into GenTrader. And what it does is it goes each hour in that period and basically tells you this is the most economical thing to do in this hour. And then it moves to the next hour. And it's more of an iterative process. And each hour it builds upon itself. It says, hey, if you follow my recommendations, this is going to be the most economical way to meet your load. So we put all these inputs into GenTrader and what comes out. Whatever time period I've studied over it, I'll get a generation output. I will get fuel consumption. I'll get my fuel expense. I'll get an estimate of my variable O&M cost, as well as my run hours for the generation. All of that can be exported to a number of different tools to be further analyzed, also looked at for reliability, which again doesn't come out of GenTrader, but is more of a human and experience input on the backside. And then we use that output is then sent over to our fuels group. Okay, they take this estimate of this most economical way to meet system load over that time period. In this case, it's a fiscal year. So October 1 through September 30th of the following year. And for that time period, the fuels group then takes those inputs and comes up with a fuels budget for that. So to go through that process, I'm actually going to turn it over to Patrice and have her walk through that part with you.
Welcome, Patrice. I like your background. That's pretty cool.
Oh, thank you. Can you hear me?
Loud and clear.
Okay, great. Mr. Mayor, Commissioners, Patrice Caffley, Fuels Manager. Right now, I'm going to give you an overview of how the fuels budget is constructed and how that translates to the final fuel budget that's submitted for your approval. I will briefly cover the methodology and the process for constructing the fuels budget. Next, I'm going to give you a description of the different components for each major fuel type. And finally, I will present the summary of the FY21 fuels budget with a comparison to last year.
Oh, dude.
Okay, next slide. Okay, so the first thing that we do is we get the volume and prices. So those are the two major components of each forecast in the fuels budget. The volume is not so much as big of a component if it's related to a service expense, but these are generally lower dollar line items. Forecasted fuel prices are typically a hybrid of internal contract pricing terms, as well as independent market projections that's available from private as well as governmental agencies. And I'll go through some examples of these. Our contracts can either be commodity, transportation, or service contracts. Examples of commodity contracts that we would have in place would be coal, lime, or fly ash. We'd also have transportation for firm pipeline transportation, as well as for rail transportation. Examples of service contracts we'd have is for lab services, for testing the quality of fuel, as well as for maintaining rail cars. Independent industry publications that we commonly use would be like a Argos Coal Daily, Platts Coal Daily, a Pyra or a Wood Mackenzie forecast. And these are industry experts. They're studying the market every day. They're doing research on what what's happening in the market that's going to affect future prices. We also utilize information from mainly the Energy Information Administration. This is publicly available information. They aggregate prices for trades that have taken place in the commodity market. They study the changes that are happening, and they make regular publications and forecasts as to what those prices would be. We also heavily rely on in the different indices. For natural gas, we rely heavily on the New York Mercantile Exchange, or NYMEX. We also utilize a lot of information from the Bureau of Labor Statistics. For example, we would pull the producer price index information, as well as consumer price index and individual commodity indices. As it relates to our volume, our major fuel commodities is an output from the generation model, as Eric mentioned. However, for our manual forecast, we will utilize volume drivers as well as historical information and averages. Drivers are generally employed where there's a direct correlation between the line items. For example, the fly ash volume that's generated would be heavily dependent upon the amount of coal that was consumed during the period. If there's no apparent correlation between the items, then we take historical averages and use that as a forecast of the most likely scenario for volumes. And a perfect example of this would be for natural gas. Next slide. Okay, so for our natural gas LDC, which is our local distribution company, this is retail gas. We utilize, in this slide, you'll see historical information from 2014 to 2018. So those 5 years are plotted. And in this case, I calculated a 3-year average. That solid green line you'll see is a much smoother curve compared to the other years. And that's because we are trying to forecast what's the most likely scenario. The idea is to eliminate any anomalies that is not expected to reoccur. One other thing to take note of is that the averages are calculated on a monthly basis, and that's to account for any seasonality. You'll see that the higher usage for retail gas is in the winter months when there's higher heating usage, and then there's lower volumes in the summer months when electricity is used for cooling. Next slide. Okay, so the first step in the modeling cycle is for forecasting the delivered commodity prices of the major fuel types. And for this one, the main fuels would be the biomass, coal, natural gas, and we'll get purchase power information from another entity, which I'll go into later on. The prices are a major input that helps the model determine how best to economically dispatch those units. Generally, we will do short-term price forecasts, but we also do longer price forecasts as well. Our short-term price forecasts will generally be used for budget, which is usually a 1 or 2 year time frame. And our longer-term forecast could be 10 years. For example, we use a 10-year forecast for our 10-year site plan, which is a rolling 10-year planning tool we submit annually to the Public Service Commission. And on occasion, we will do a 20-year forecast for uses such as resource planning for the generation fleet. For the short-term forecast, we're then converted to long-term forecasts using any escalation factors that may be in contracts or utilizing independent sources such as PIRA and from the Energy Information Administration. Next slide. Okay, so now these are the different cost components for our biomass fuels. We incur all these costs to be able to burn biomass for generation. Our first and major cost is, of course, the delivered commodity. So that's the cost to deliver that chipped wood to the plant. We also have a service fee we'll pay to.
I'll ask you later.
We also have a service fee we pay to a local company that we've hired for fuel procurement. They manage the scheduling, they negotiate the contracts, and they make sure that we are meeting all the quality requirements. They have registered and certified foresters on staff to make sure that all the requirements we've put in place for forestry sustainability is complied with. Another major cost for biomass is the environmental commodities. This consists of sodium bicarbonate for SO2 control, as well as ammonia for NOx control. Currently, we're not utilizing the sodium bicarbonate because the SO2 level in biomass is so low, it's an unnecessary expense at this point. As with any solid fuel, we have byproducts that are generated from the combustion process. For biomass, we generate bottom ash and fly ash. These are both, we pay a cost to have those removed and disposed of. In addition to that, we have other miscellaneous expense, which may be maintaining lab equipment. There's a small lab at the plant site where they perform routine testing to also meet contract requirements. There's also an annual survey where we survey the volume of fuel on site to make sure that matches as closely as possible to the value we have on the books. In addition to that, there are several audits that takes place during the year. There are biannual audits for the minimum sustainability standards and for forest stewardship guidelines for ensuring that forest sustainability is being maintained. And our last item is diesel for the equipment that's used for pile maintenance or for feeding the boiler. Next slide. Okay, our other solid fuel is coal. Similar type costs. We have the commodity costs, transportation to move that commodity from Central Appalachia to the plant. And similarly, there are environmental commodities, lime for SO2 control, as well as urea for NOx control. Over the last several years, we haven't been utilizing urea as we had a capital project that installed low NOx burners into the boiler that helped to meet the requirements. So this was an expense that we were able to cut from the budget. Our combustion byproducts also as a solid fuel, fly ash, as well as scrubber byproduct. The fly ash is unique in that we recover some of our expenses by sale of that fly ash. We sell that product to a local company to help with their production of cement. One of the service agreements, as I mentioned, is for rail car maintenance. So essentially we have a shop on site where we cycle our rail cars through for regular maintenance. We avoid a lot of costs by doing that because the alternative is that the railroad would pull cars with any issues. They would fix those cars, but then they'll sell it as a really expensive bill that goes along with that. As far as miscellaneous expenses, we have ad valorem taxes, and for every mile that we travel through each state, we incur taxes. So all the states that we travel, the train travels through from Central Appalachia to the plant, we'll get a tax bill associated with that. We'll also have price analyses. As I mentioned, there are several publications where we get pricing information and price indicators. We'll cover those miscellaneous expenses. We'll also have quality analyses. Every train that comes from Central Appalachia to the plant, a sample is taken, and we analyze that for different quality parameters to make sure that what we're getting is what we're paying for. And we'll get that analysis before the train arrives at the plant and is unloaded. And just as with the biomass, we have an annual audit that takes place to make sure our volume on site is matching as closely as possible to what we have on the books. Similarly, we have diesel costs for all the equipment on site that's used for pile maintenance, as well as feeding that fuel to the plant. Next slide. For natural gas, we have the cost of the commodity, and there's also transportation. This can either be firm transportation or non-firm transportation. What that means is that we have rights to that space on the pipeline, and we do have a portion of our needs under contract. So we have some portion that's firm, and we have a portion that we will ride with the market. There's also usage charges associated with that transportation and a fuel charge. That fuel charge essentially is a portion of that gas commodity cost that they use to run the compressors to move that gas from the production areas in Texas, Louisiana, Alabama into the market area here in Florida. We'll also have costs associated with baseload contracts. That would be a part of the commodity. Currently, we don't have any long-term baseload contracts. Our baseload contracts only run for about a year. For about a month. So that is a fixed volume at a fixed price. And as a benefit of buying forward for that time period, we receive a discount on that price. In addition to natural gas, we have a hedging program, and we have hedging expenses associated with that. Typically, that will be associated with futures contracts where we have margin calls, but for the last several years, we've mainly been using call options. So that has not been a big cost for us. And last but not least, other publications and consulting associated with hedging that would go into our price analysis expenses. For purchase power, there's no long-term contracts currently on our books. We mainly purchase power hourly or a day ahead, or we will purchase forward blocks of power if there is a unit in outage or to maintain system reliability. We also have the contract costs associated with solar as well as G2 and landfill gas. There's also a small cost associated with renewable energy credits. And essentially this is a cost for participating in the market. And so for every year we keep our assets on a registry, there are subscription fees associated with that. There are also free fees associated with making sales and transfers to other parties. And finally, into our FY21 budget. For generation or forecasted expense adds up to almost $67 million. So that's generation associated with biomass, coal, natural gas. Our purchase power is almost $16 million. And the total for that is $82.6 million. And that would go into the fuel adjustment calculations. For our LDC cost or retail gas, that's just over $7 million, and that would be part of our PGA expenses. So for FY21, our total fuel budget is almost $89.7 million. This is just $130,000 higher than it was for the current fiscal year. And our forecast for FY22 is $85.8 million. This is $3.7 million lower than what we have we forecasted for FY21. And I believe that's mainly due to serving the load in Alachua. So mid FY22, our contract for serving that load in Alachua goes away. And just to keep in mind that FY22 that forecast will be refreshed next spring around this time with more up-to-date volumes and more up-to-date prices to give a much truer forecast. Any questions?
All right, thank you, Ms. Kathleen. I don't see any questions from the commission, but I will put the call out there. All right, so Mr. Walters, Ms. Kathleen, thank you both for the very thorough explanation of how we arrive at our fuels budget. Very much appreciated, and thank you, as always, for your ongoing work on behalf of our customers and the city.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, so Mr. Resnick. Yeah, Mr. Resnick, so I guess we'll just transition smooth as silk into the more general budget discussion.
Yes, good afternoon, Mr. Mayor, commissioners. Can everyone see my screen?
We got it.
All right, perfect. This is our first budget session for the 2021 budget. For the past 2 years, we started the process in January. And of course, this year we've had a few delays, which I'll go over in a couple of minutes. So it's unusual, I think, for myself to be here in May. But I do think it's actually a good place to be because of the recent events. So it gives us a little bit more time to kind of evaluate where we are moving into 2021. So the presentation that you will have from myself and Mr. Benton will cover high-level topics such as GRU's responsibilities to the board, the commission, to our bondholders, to our customers, as well as our debt portfolio. Our credit ratings and some recent conversations that we've had with the rating agencies, the GFT, and then kind of the next steps. So I will start the presentation from here. And I wanted to provide an overview to everybody about the status of the budget workshops. I realize we have a new commissioner, so hopefully this will be helpful for her. So the last 2 years, again, we started in January. This year, the January 28th budget workshop was repurposed for a discussion on the network services agreement with FP&L. And February 25th was canceled because that was a scheduled continuation. Unfortunately, COVID started to impact the meeting schedules beginning in April and May. So we were originally scheduled to go on May 26th, and now the city manager was kind enough to allow us to partner with this session. So here we are on May 26th with our first budget workshop. I will mention that the June 16th is still to be calendared. There's an issue with the television schedule, I believe, but when this backup came in, it still had June 16th. So today we're going to be covering responsibilities, credit ratings, etc. And then also the next session will cover revenues and O&M expenses and the rate piece of that. I thought it would be a good opportunity to provide an overview to the commission. Sometimes I feel like we kind of just go right into the numbers and don't always provide a big picture overview about why we're talking about the things that we talk about. And so I wanted to do this also for the existing commission members, but the new commissioner as well. So what this is showing are basically a graphical representation of who GRU management reports to at the end of the day. So of course we report to the city commission, we report to our customers, and we also report to our bondholders. The next 3 slides will have very similar information, but they will be kind of distinctly different. So as I move through that, please tell me if you have any questions on those. So of course we have a responsibility to the commission. And when we come to the commission at various times of the year, we're talking about generally the same topics. The first one is to maintain the financial health of the utility, which includes cash, liquidity, and adequate reserves. And we talk about protecting the utility's credit ratings, and that's working with the rating agencies, with the commission, with internally to make sure that we are keeping our metrics at an appropriate level. We also have a responsibility to provide safe and reliable capital infrastructure and services. And in order to provide the capital infrastructure, we also have O&M expenses that go along with that. And we also have a responsibility to return the utility profits to general government to be utilized for services. This is in the form of the general fund transfer, and it's the last payment made after all of the above items are paid. So this is just an overview of our responsibility to the commission. We also have a responsibility to our customers, and I put in there both ratepayers and taxpayers, because we do have our customer base are paying rates into the utility, but the general fund transfer also impacts the taxpayers within this community. So again, we have a responsibility to maintain the financial health of the utility, to protect GRU's credit ratings, the safe and reliable capital infrastructure, and then also to return the profits to general government so that they may be used to assist all the taxpayers. The third component is we have a responsibility to our bondholders. And we speak a significant amount about our outstanding debt portfolio, and we'll cover that in just a moment. But as a reminder, we issue debt in order to receive cash in order to build our capital infrastructure. And a utility is very capital intensive. It takes a significant amount of funding in order to maintain, build, repair, replace the capital infrastructure in this community. So we have a responsibility to the bondholders that loan us the money to do this, to maintain the financial health of the utility and to protect our credit ratings. We also have a responsibility to the bondholders to protect the infrastructure that they're loaning us money for, and also to pay that back. Quite honestly, without the funds from these investors, it would be extremely difficult to maintain the capital infrastructure that we need to. These are long-term projects that cover anywhere from 5 to 80 years. And so the spreading out of those payments in the debt portfolio allows us to do that. So I'm going to pause right here to see if anybody has any questions before I keep moving forward. Okay. So the next piece of this will be the debt portfolio. I'd like to turn this section over to Mark Benton, and he will cover that, and then I will come back for the credit ratings. Madam Clerk.
Yeah, as Ms. Rasnick pointed out, utilities are capital intensive industries. We need to be able to efficiently access on a recurring basis the capital markets to obtain funds to assist in the construction, acquisition, and maintenance of the infrastructure that we utilize to provide services to our customers. So next slide, please. Our debt levels are, to say the least, they're an ongoing source of discussion. And at just under $1.7 billion, they are high for a utility with our customer base. I do think it's important to acknowledge, as this chart points out, that that $1.7 billion figure represents a $277 million or 14.3% reduction in our outstanding principal over the past 5 years. Next slide. Mr. Mayor, as you're aware, GRU management came to the City Commission last October and asked for authorization to execute a number of potential transactions contingent upon certain market conditions becoming viable. The Commission granted those authorizations, and over a period of 6 months, we completed 7 transactions. The strategy behind those transactions was to execute restructurings which, without increasing or extending principal, would result in reduced interest expense. We would then utilize the cash flow from that reduced interest expense to accelerate redemption of existing principal, reduce our outstanding debt faster than the existing amortization schedules, and thus further reduce interest payments. Next slide. This table represents the interest savings by year generated from the restructurings we've completed to date. It's a little over $134 million over 30 years. And staff is currently working with our financial advisor, PFM, to identify the specific bond series and maturities to redeem with these funds. Next slide, please. So over the past several years, while we've reduced outstanding principal and worked through these restructuring, we've also been able to make some progress in de-risking our debt portfolio. And as this chart shows, over the period from 2017 to date, we've increased the percentage of our debt that is either fixed or synthetically fixed from around 87% to 94%. So unless there are any questions, I'm going to turn it back to Ms. Rasnick.
Thank you, Mr. Benton. There are none. Ms. Rasnick, please continue.
So as I mentioned earlier, in order to issue debt, we work with our bondholders, and part of that process is to receive ratings from the rating agencies. When we issued and restructured some of our debt last year, let's say February of 2019, the 3 rating agencies came in and completed a review, and they've recently completed an additional review for all 3. Moody's discussed some items with us in 2020, February 2020, and it was a pretty short discussion, and they affirmed us at AA3. Fitch started discussions right before the pandemic, so we've actually had a couple of conversations with Fitch about some of the impacts of COVID, revenues, et cetera. I do fully expect we'll have another discussion with them sometime in the next few weeks to update them as far as how our revenues and expenses are landing. S&P, we have been talking with them off and on for about 4 weeks now. They also came in kind of late to the process as far as COVID. So they had many more questions about how the utility was being impacted in this area. But as you can see, they've each affirmed our ratings. These discussions with the rating agencies, they're very good discussions. We get into a lot of the details, and they pay close attention to GRU in this particular community. So the conversations that we have with each one of them are talking about a lot of various items, but there are some topics that are very typical, and each one of them usually hits the same topic. So I've put those on the next slide. All 3 of the rating agencies have expressed concern over our high electric rates. I know that is not something that we are already aware of. Our high leverage, the high general fund transfer. And in the discussions with particularly S&P, the COVID pandemic may or may not impact the utility to the point where the financial metrics start to drop. So they have some general concerns about that overview. So now that I've kind of said all of that, we monitor our revenues and receivables and cash balances internally on a pretty regular basis, just to ensure that if we are seeing a monetary concern with COVID, that we would be able to react to it. I know that Mr. Bolarski, the general manager, communicates to the commission on a regular basis about that, and we're not seeing major movements. So our revenues are reasonable. They've been down just slightly, but you would argue that's due to weather. I don't know if you remember this, but May of last year was extremely hot. It was about 100 degrees every day. The receivables, we've seen a bump in past due receivables. I know there was a communication to the commission earlier about that. It's not something that I'm concerned about, particularly with payment arrangements for our customers. And I think that will actually mitigate that particular piece. The loads don't seem to be dropping and our cash collections are steady. So having said all of this about the conversations with the rating agencies, these are the things that we're seeing internally that seem to support more of a positive trend. So I mentioned at the beginning of the presentation that coming back in May was actually probably beneficial because we'll actually have the May revenue numbers the beginning of next week, and we'll be able to have a closer look to see how COVID is truly impacting the utility. So the next time that you see us, we'll be talking about those revenue trends and our expense trends at our next meeting. Are there
Thank you,
any
Mr. Resnick. If you could please pause. We have a question from Commissioner Simmons.
Thank you, Mayor. So taking into consideration that the revenues are relatively steady, do you think the rating agencies will take that into account?
Absolutely. Yes, they will. And those are the communications that we provide to them. The rating agency analysts that we work with, they live and work in the New York City area, which has been quite honestly, the hardest hit in the country. So that's what they see. And as they start to branch out across the country, they see varying levels of how utilities are being impacted by the pandemic. The conversation that we had with S&P, the initial conversation was not so happy because he's just coming out of that type of environment. A week later, he was in a different frame of mind because he was seeing things be more positive. And I know that was kind of a long answer to that. But again, they look at like several dozen utilities across the country. And when you're seeing pockets that aren't doing so well, and then you're seeing pockets that are kind of stable, it takes them a little while to kind of wrap their head around the numbers and to get some comfort with that. So we will be having further conversations, particularly with Fitch and S&P, to talk to them about where our revenues and expenses are. But to be honest, I'm not seeing significant drops in any areas. I'm seeing an increase in receivables, but the receivable increase is based upon a receivable balance of $30 million. So it's workable as we work through the payment arrangements. And that's not something that the rating agencies are not expecting. As a matter of fact, that was one of their first questions was, what payment arrangements are you putting in place for your customers?
Are you good, Commissioner Simmons?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Please continue, Ms. Resnick.
So we calculate our financial ratios on a monthly basis, just so that we can make sure that we are aware of exactly how the rating agencies are calculating their ratios as well. It's interesting because all three do it just a little bit differently. So we've included Fitch here. Fitch is one of the more they're the most conservative rating agency in their calculations. So that's why we've used them. If you can take a look at the leverage column, leverage is in essence our ability to pay back our outstanding debt. So it's our funds available for debt service compared to our outstanding debt. And as you can see, it has decreased, which is a positive sign for the utility. These years, let's see, 14 through 17 are when the biomass capital lease was included. And again, that was incorporated as debt according to the calculations. When we purchased the plant, we in essence reduced our outstanding debt portfolio by, it was about 250 million. So you see these reductions here. With the plan moving forward to take the FY20 restructurings that the commission worked with us on, those funds will eventually start being used, as Mr. Ben mentioned earlier, to actually pay down some of our outstanding debt, which will provide a positive benefit into these numbers here. The other piece is moving cash up. So it's a balance between outstanding debt and pulling cash up. Our debt service coverage ratio has gone up as well. Coverage of fixed charge, sorry, I've got you guys are in the middle of my screen, I'm so sorry. So the coverage of obligations has also gone up as well, and you can see our cash and our liquidity are pretty solid. A lot of this has to do with the commission working with GRU to put in a cash balance policy back in 2019. So that had a really positive impact on these calculations. So how everything fits together. GRU needs to have adequate cash and reserves in place in order to support what our bondholders are looking for from the utility, which is a financially healthy utility that has the ability and the capacity to pay back the debt that we use to build our capital infrastructure. That's kind of it at the end of the day. It's in its simplest form. And over
Ms. Resnick, can you pause? Actually, I missed a hand there from Commissioner Hayes Santos.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's on the previous slide, Ms. Resnick, and on the, I guess one more slide up. Yeah, read that one there. On the Fitch AA negative and A plus. So those numbers on the bottom there are what they are looking to, if you wanted to move up. Is that correct? Or to hit that metric? Is that kind of what they're, those numbers they publish, or?
So it's a little more complicated when you're looking at how they actually rate the utility. There are several factors to it. One of them are management, it's the economy, it's the customer base, those sorts of things. But this does play into it, and it is a very important piece of this for Fitch in particular. Fitch takes leverage very, very seriously. So the conversations that we've had with Fitch is they would actually like to see our leverage number down to 8 times. Okay. And that is a huge lift in a very short period of time. The way that you do that is you either reduce debt or raise your cash balances.
So what does the 4.6 then mean there?
That's their median for that rating.
Oh, okay, gotcha. Okay, those are the medians across the board. All right, thank you.
Right. Now, to keep it in context, that's their median for that particular rating. For utilities, there's a natural expectation that your leverage is going to be naturally higher because you're carrying more debt because of that capital infrastructure.
Okay, so that's not just utilities.
It's everybody.
It's everybody. Okay, if you're Walmart or whatever versus.
Right.
Okay. All right.
Right.
Thank you.
And the conversations we've had specifically with Fitch is they would like us to be around 8 times. And so the things that we bring to the commission are designed to, support and again, the financial health of the utility, but also make sure that we're protecting these metrics as we move forward. If we don't protect the metrics, and we've said this multiple times, there's always that possibility that the rating agencies will shift us down another notch. That will impact the utility and increase costs. It's almost an immediate movement where the costs actually move up. By implementing the cash balance policy and being able to put that positive cash influx into the utility, it has provided in essence, a floor for us. It's been very, very helpful. The rating agencies liked it. They liked the cash balance policy that the commission put in place. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay. So I talked about the cash balance policy itself. And the next piece, as we went through the 2019 restructuring, we took out our commercial paper and issued long-term debt. What that allowed the utility to do was to create a significant available stream of liquidity. In, oh goodness, I think it was early April, we came to the commission to do a line of credit with SunTrust Bank of $50 million. So combined with the liquidity capacity that was freed up last year and the 2 lines of credit that the utility has, we have significant liquidity right now. And that has been met with very positive comments by the rating agencies. What they were seeing kind of moving into the crisis, where there were a lot of corporations, utilities, whoever, that were trying to gain access to a line of credit or gain access to cash. And you saw a lot of that, those moving parts in the market when the market was actually selling off. People were moving to cash during that particular period of time. And so when we had those conversations with the agencies about our available liquidity and then issuing that line of credit, it was met with a very positive response. As a matter of fact, I was told that if we were reducing liquidity, that would have been a concern for the rating agencies. So that line is available should the utility need it. If for some reason COVID does start to impact the utility's finances, we can use that liquidity piece. And I just wanted to point out that this was also commission supported, and it really is assisted with the health of the utility. So these particular pieces, as I've mentioned previously, also support our credit ratings. The one that I haven't mentioned was the debt defeasance plan. That was also well received. So when you look at a $1.7 billion portfolio and you're looking to take out $100 million, it is a relatively small amount. But in the whole scheme of things, we're chipping at it a little bit at a time with your support, and that piece was really well received. So beginning in the 2021 budget cycle, we will actually start defeasing debt. And I've talked about the last bullet point. So the next steps. That date, and I apologize again, the backup was provided before that date was actually locked out. We will need some assistance with the commission and the clerk's office to determine when we actually come back with our next budget presentation, which will be our only presentation going forward, unless the commission would like to see something else. It would be for the revenues, O&M expenses, and capital expenditures and the rate approval. An additional next step is discussing and putting in place a general fund transfer formula beginning in 2022. One of the topics that I mentioned already was the GFT. There is one rating agency in particular that not having a formula in place, they do not see that positively at all. So they want to make sure that there's a formula in place going forward. Are there any questions on any of these pieces that I've covered so far?
Yeah, I have a question just about, I agree that having a clear GFT formula that's predictable and is developed through reasonable criteria and verifiable data is important. I do think it would behoove us to ask an outside party to help develop that formula. Baker Tilly could do it, I know. We have a relationship with them. There's probably some other folks out there that also have the resources to do this, that already know our organization well. Because then I think it becomes a little bit easier for people out there that follow the utility, our neighbors, our customers, the commission, and the budget folks on both sides of the organization have confidence that that's an appropriate number and represents the value that our neighbors get from owning their utility. So that's sort of the direction that I think we should go in order to do that. We do have a couple other folks that want to weigh in. So let's turn to Commissioner A. Santos first.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And it was to your point on the having an outside party. So I guess that's a question for the manager and both managers on kind of what is the path forward and timeline on a general fund transfer, on when you think you might be able to have some.
Yeah, Ms. Rasnick, did you want to answer that, and we can hear from the managers as well?
Ed probably wants to weigh in. I believe Ed and Lee have had this conversation already, and the instruction that came to my office was to begin the process, and we have begun the process of looking for an external consultant to assist in this. The ITN RFP, whichever piece it ends up being, is in progress now. I expect we should be able to get it out, I would say probably within 2 to 4 weeks, depending on procurement. The list of firms are 8 total firms. So it's the big 4, right? The big 4 accounting firms. There are 2 rate firms that are financial advisor, offer the names to us that have the capacity to do that. It's also Baker Tilly and a couple of local firms as well. So in thinking of the 8 firms, we're not going to get 8 firms that are going to come back and bid on it. So hopefully that'll give us a couple of people to choose from. So that is actually in progress. Mr. Bolarski, did you want to weigh in on that?
No, I think you said it. Yeah, Lee and I early on had sat down and discussed, the path forward with developing this, and we both agreed that there needs to be something formulaic, and so it's a function of, let's find some folks out there that can look at this and kind of opine on what maybe not even the best way, but just what are the options, and that's what we're hoping comes back from, what I don't think is a very lengthy analysis. I mean, I think it's something that should not be very expensive and would be very beneficial for both general government and GRU.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Bolarski. Mr. Feldman, did you want to add anything?
I think Ed and Claudia summed it up fine. I think having an independent party that can help develop the formula is going to be critical, so that it's not one side versus the other. That ultimately we get something that is predictable, preserves a functioning GFT for general government side, but recognizes that GRU needs to be a viable entity as well. So devil will be in the details, but I'm confident we can get there. And if we're shooting for fiscal year 22, we have plenty of time to work through this.
Thank you. If you two keep getting along so professionally well together, people are going to start getting concerned. I just give you that warning. Commissioner Hayes Santos, did you have anything else?
No, I support us getting an outside person, and I do believe that we need to have a formula that works for everyone. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, very good. Thank you. Commissioner Ward?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to weigh in that I support that strategy as well. Take the politics out of it. Let's set a strategy and a general formula that we can agree on going forward.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Simmons.
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to, I support it as well. I think it's a great idea. Thank you, Mayor.
Very good. All right. So you have a lot of support for moving forward with that. Thank you for getting it started already to both the managers and Ms. Rasnick. Okay, back to you, Ms. Rasnick.
So the next section was on the GFT and a formula. So if you don't mind, I'm just going to click past those slides unless you do want to hear about that.
No, I think we're all in agreement that we want to move forward with, getting the outside third party to help us through that.
Okay. So Mr. Benton got off the hook. He was going to cover that.
Well, I know Mr. Benton well, and he always likes to grab the microphone and talk for as long as possible. So we'll have to give him another.
I've been told frequently that the less I speak, the more people appreciate it. So that's
we respect your work greatly, Mr. Benton. Thank you for being a good sport.
All right, so to kind of wrap up, the Commission and GRU have worked diligently to support a financially healthy utility for the last couple of years that I've been in this role. So the adequate cash and reserves to support needed and potential emergencies is there, and we also have adequate liquidity if cash reserves are not adequate. I think I've mentioned this in the past. We do have adequate cash. I do not foresee a need to pull down our liquidity unless we have significant revenue reductions, which again is not something that I'm seeing right now. So we've got a really good floor, and we're really appreciative to the commission as a whole for being very supportive of our process over the past couple of years to get these items in place and put a floor in the utility. So thank you. So what we'd like to do is continue to maintain our strong credit ratings to keep our borrowing costs lower. Then obviously to develop a multi-year formula that is based on the utility's profits. So again, our next meeting still needs to be scheduled. As far as I know, unless the commission wishes differently, it will be our final budget meeting before the September readings, and we will be covering revenues, O&M expenses, capital, and rates. So with that, I am concluded.
Okay, thank you so much, everybody that worked so hard to get this together. I will work with the clerk, who will work with the commission to get that next meeting scheduled. I've been asking the clerk to try to find morning dates. I think generally we've been in the habit of always scheduling things starting at 1, and that might free up some space if we can start a meeting, say at 9 in the morning. I don't know if that works for everybody or not, but I'm always the guy with the most issues when it comes to scheduling, and I'm done teaching for the summer. And I think, Madam Clerk, we should just try to schedule a second placeholder just in case anything comes out of that next meeting that is unresolved. We have some certainty that we can circle back around quickly and address them, so we can know where we're headed for the resolutions. But other than that, I don't have any questions at this time. I think someone said earlier, the devil is in the details. It's going to come down to the revenue requirements and the impact on rates. And so it's hard to say anything definitive until we know those numbers. Anybody from the commission have any other questions? I'm not seeing any. Okay, there's no motion, but we'll go ahead and turn to Larry to see if there are any members of the public that wish to comment at this time.
Yes, good afternoon, Mayor Nathan Scott. With respect to the proposed GFT formula, the proposed formula proxy is inaccurate. An investor-owned utility would pay the city a franchise fee and property taxes. It would not pay all three, including a dividend. So your formula is skewed, but beyond that, the 10% ROE being proposed for the dividend payment is excessive in a zero interest rate environment. Under the capital asset pricing model, the cost of the return on equity is a function of the government risk-free rate, which is either the 10 or the 30-year treasury bond, which is at all-time low with the appropriate risk premium, which does not support a 10% ROE. It's a small amount because GRU is so heavily laden that it really doesn't have a profit, as evidenced by the fact that it doesn't have the ability to fund the GFT at current levels. So if you look holistically at the data, you're still seeing an inability at GRU to fund the amount. If you look at the formula being proposed, throwing out the dividend, which is not appropriate, the property taxes and the franchise fee proxies being used generate about $32 million plus of money for the GFT, which is appropriate, but that's about $6 million less than what we're currently forcing out of the utility, which is an issue for the credit rating agencies. It's an issue for GRU. Now, the issue here is I support a formalistic approach going forward.
I'm sorry, sir. It appears his line dropped.
Okay. Do we have anybody else on the line?
No, sir. Not at this time.
Okay. Very good. Sorry that.
Hey, I got cut off. Yeah, I got cut off. So can I finish my time briefly?
We can still hear you.
Okay. Yeah. So I'm sorry the call dropped. So I support the formalistic approach, Mayor Poe. I think that's the right thing to do. I do not support paying the extra money to go hire a consultant to figure out something that is basic rudimentary math. And again, the math is 32 million is supported by GRU, about 6 million less than what we're paying now. And the credit rating agencies have an issue with that. But if you look holistically, what the credit rating agencies and GRU are telling you is that cash reserves require multi-year rate increases to support the credit metrics, and you're going to have to cut the GFT. But the city commission doesn't want to do this. So I don't know why we're spending money on a consultant to do something that's so rudimentary that I could sit down with Ed and Lee and figure out in about 15 minutes what's right. I mean, it's not that difficult. But again, we have to waste money to go prove to city government that the result is fair. That's not good use of limited capital. And finally, there was one other thing that was said. I probably am remiss for not remembering it. But again, the key thing is that the proxy being used, should not include dividends, because even Mr. Feldman would tell you that FPL didn't pay the city of Fort Lauderdale dividends. They paid them property taxes and a franchise fee, if that. So again, the proposed proxy is overreaching. It has been for years, and the credit rating agencies acknowledge that. It's just the city commission needs to curtail its spending, which you guys don't want to do. But we can expect property tax increases, increase in fire assessment fee, GRU rate increases. And the one final thing I wanted to mention is that these receivables that Ms. Resnick did not mention, she said a memo was sent to the city commission. The public doesn't have that memo because you don't post your emails. So I'd like a public records request for a copy of that memo with the state of the past due receivables, so we can understand what the dollar magnitude is, not only on residential, but on commercial customers during this pandemic. Thank you.
Hey, Larry, do we have anybody else on the line?
Mayor, not at the moment. There did appear to be a caller trying to get in during Mr. Scott's comments. And so if the caller is listening and wants to call back in, they can try to do so. But at this time, we don't have anybody else on the line.
Okay, thank you. Meantime, we'll turn back to the commission. Commissioner Johnson.
Thank you, Mayor. This is just a completely different subject. It's about our June 4th virtual city commission meeting. And I guess we have a strategic initiatives workshop. And I'm wondering if there's any other option at all besides doing both in one day, whether that means scheduling something in the morning but I am personally, I can just imagine, by the evening meeting and all of that really heavy work that we're going to be doing in the morning. I'm just wondering if there's any other option at all. I know it's really difficult to schedule everyone, but
Yeah, I don't believe so. I think it was everything they could do just to get those dates. We also lost another day already that the retreat, if you will, was supposed to be held on. The city commission agenda is not real heavy. I believe, Madam Clerk, there's 3 discussion items, and then there's a couple second readings. Thank you, Larry. There's a couple second readings from our last meeting. Madam Clerk, can you? It's a pretty light meeting.
Okay.
But we can ask the clerk. I mean, if we can get all those different schedules together. We've already got the consultant that's hosting it lined up, and it was very difficult to get all those times and dates.
Okay.
To begin with.
Okay. When I got the email or the text message, I said it made me want to cry and scream at the same time.
Yeah, I mean, I understand what you're saying. It's going to be very difficult. But I mean, if
it has to be done, it has to be done. I just wanted to ask if there was another date available.
Yeah. We'll try. I think we've exhausted all of our options to get to where we were.
Okay.
Okay. Let's go back to Larry for our caller that was trying to get through.
Yes, Mayor. Nancy is standing by to speak to your previous item. Nancy, if you're there, please go ahead.
Good afternoon, everyone. This is Nancy Darren, kind of a different venue here. I really appreciate the comprehensive presentation. And my question was, through our membership in APPA, do they offer any service of helping us figure out a GFT and formulas around rates? With so much change in the utility industry, I know there's a lot to consider, and my awareness of them is they're very forward-looking and trying to help figure out this transition period. So that was my question.
Thanks.
Because I know our membership is very valuable. Thank you.
Yes, and we would argue we of course add more value to that organization than we than from. I wouldn't say that ever. We receive an equal benefit of being members and what we contribute. But can you answer that question? What kind of sort of technical assistance APPA provide? I'm sorry, for members of the public, that's American Public Power Association. Basically, a bunch of municipal utilities all around the country that have an association. But do they provide technical assistance for things like this, Ed?
You know, APPA is a robust organization. They tend to do benchmarking and things like that. They tend not to get involved in particular situations. It's kind of a difficult lift for them to make judgments about any of the particular members, as opposed to just setting benchmarks and things like that. And frankly, I'd be more comfortable with an objective party.
Yeah. So what I'm guessing is whatever third party ends up doing this, they would turn to APPA's information to sort of help build their recommendation, but APPA wouldn't do that directly.
Correct.
Okay. Good question though, Nancy. And this is going to be my plug for any of the commissioners when doing something like getting on an airplane and staying in a hotel doesn't worry you too much. And there's things like live conferences again. I highly recommend attending the APPA conference at least once and going a day or two early to take the trainings. That there's a bunch of different 4-hour classes on a bunch of different topics that are incredibly helpful, especially when you talk about things like rate setting and budgeting and things like that. So and it's a good group of people. There are people, every single person that participates in that cares deeply about municipal utilities and making them as strong as we possibly can. There's a real sort of fellowship that exists within the organization as well. Okay, well, I want to thank everybody. I know this was a lot of work, and I know some of you were biting your nails because we had these discussions so late in the process when we've typically been starting them in January. But I feel like we're in a good place. We certainly have a lot of work ahead of us. I just would encourage any of the individual commissioners, if you have any concerns or ideas, staff would love to hear from you. So you can talk those things out, and they make sure to consider anything that is kind of rattling around your cage there, so they're prepared at that next meeting. Just let them know, and they'll set up some time to speak with you. And with that, we have exhausted our agenda. We will see all of you tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock for our joint meeting with the County Commission. So until then, thank you, and this meeting is adjourned.